The scent of blood and iron clung to the night like a curse. Moonlight sliced through the canopy in thin, trembling beams, catching on the slick bodies of fallen warriors. The forest that had once whispered with the songs of wolves was now a graveyard. The earth was soaked crimson. The air trembled with silence, that dreadful kind of silence that only follows unthinkable violence. And in the center of it all stood a woman. Her chest rose and fell with ragged breath. A silver blade dripped steady trails of red down to the broken leaves at her feet. Her hair, dark auburn braided for war, had come loose, strands clinging to the sweat on her skin. Her eyes burned gold in the moonlight, molten and wild. Kira Ashenblade, the rogue who defied every law of the Pax, who disappeared into the Roguelands years ago and returned only when blood demanded an answer. She wasn't supposed to survive this. 20 trained Shadow Moon warriors had surrounded her in the clearing elite soldiers bred from generations of dominance and discipline. They were supposed to bring her down, drag her to their king, and end her legend. But now, they were gone. The forest floor was littered with bodies, the finest soldiers of the northern territories. Their howls silenced, their strength wasted beneath her boots. She stood among them like vengeance made flesh, her heart pounding not from fear, but from the fading rush of battle. Far above, from the ridge overlooking the clearing, the Alpha King watched. Dante Shadowcrest, ruler of the Shadow Moon Pack, heir to the bloodline that had built its empire on war and conquest. His jaw was a blade of fury, his hands curled tight enough to draw blood from his palms. Half his elite guard, half slaughtered by one woman. And she was still standing. His wolf raged beneath his skin, snarling for vengeance, demanding her death. His soldiers had been his pride, his brothers, his trusted few. To see them cut down by a rogue female, it clawed at every instinct he had. The alpha in him wanted her throat torn open, her blood offered to the moon as penance. But when his gaze met hers across the bloodied ground, when her golden eyes lifted to find his something shifted inside him, something deep, old, and dangerous stirred where only wrath should have lived. For a heartbeat, the forest vanished. There was only her, defiant, unbroken, drenched in blood that wasn't hers. His wolf stopped snarling. It recognized something that his mind refused to name. That scent, faint, even through the smoke and death, silver rain and wildflowers. It hit him like a punch to the chest. His heart stuttered once, then roared back to life. No, it couldn't be. Not here. Not now. Not her. Dante's pulse thundered through his veins as he stood on that ridge, eyes fixed on the rogue below. The air itself seemed to warp around her. His wolf pushed against his control, desperate, yearning, howling one word into the marrow of his bones. Mate. It couldn't be true. The moon goddess wouldn't be so cruel. But the pull was undeniable. The scent, the spark, the ache in his chest, he knew it. He'd felt it once before, 5 years ago, for the briefest second, before it vanished like smoke. The scent he'd hunted across 5 kingdoms. The bond that had haunted his nights and frayed his sanity. And now it stood before him in the body of the woman who had just butchered his men. The fury bled from him, replaced by a storm of disbelief, confusion, and something far more treacherous. Desire. Her gaze didn't falter under his. She knew he was watching. She'd wanted him to see this. Every strike, every death it had been for him. To send a message. To draw him out. She had succeeded. Dante's throat tightened, his instincts warring with his reason. His wolf demanded he go to her, to claim her before the bond drove him mad. The king in him knew she was the enemy, a killer, a rogue, a walking declaration of war. He tasted blood as his fangs cut into his own lip. The metallic tang anchored him, barely. He couldn't think clearly. The air between them pulsed with invisible tension, thick as honey and twice as suffocating. She tilted her chin upward, golden eyes sharp as the blade still slick in her hand. There was no fear in her only challenge. Her voice, when it came, carried through the clearing like steel dragged across stone. Come down and finish what your wolves started, Shadowcrest. It was not a plea. It was a dare. The words struck him like lightning. His wolf howled, his body trembling with restraint. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not his council, not his warriors, not anyone. He should have killed her where she stood. The law demanded it. The pack demanded it. But the bond that cursed, divine bond, demanded something else. Dante's voice, when it came, was a growl edged in power. It rolled down the hill, carrying command enough to silence the wind. Clean her, he said, his voice cold and absolute. And bring her to the palace. The warriors who still lived froze, exchanging uncertain looks. None dared question him. Kira's mouth curved a ghost of a smile, sharp and mocking. Her blade dipped, blood still dripping from its tip. You'll regret that, Alpha. He already did, because as she stood there, bathed in moonlight and carnage, he realized one terrible truth. She wasn't just his enemy. She was his fate. And fate had a wicked sense of humor. The realm of Luparia had always belonged to the wolves. To outsiders, it might have looked like a land carved from legend, vast forests older than memory, rivers that glowed beneath the full moon, mountains so high their peaks vanished into clouds. But for those born under the moon goddess's blessing, this realm wasn't myth. It was hierarchy, bloodline, and survival. Luparia was divided by power 5 great packs, each ruling a territory the size of a kingdom. And between them, at the heart of the land, stretched the wild, lawless expanse known as the Roguelands, the graveyard of broken loyalties. In the north, where the snow never melted and strength was the only language, ruled the Shadow Moon Pack. It was Dante Shadowcrest's domain, a land of warriors forged from discipline and domination. Their pups trained from the moment they could shift, molded into soldiers before they could even dream of freedom. To be born Shadow Moon was to be bred for obedience and conquest. They didn't lose battles. They couldn't afford to. To the east lay the Crimson Fang Pack, rich with gold and silk, where wolves traded more with words than claws. Their lands glittered with wealth, but their warriors were few, and their loyalty came at a price. In the south stretched the brutal territories of the Iron Claw Pack, where violence wasn't just survival, it was entertainment. They held gladiator rings and blood arenas, where wolves fought their own kind for sport, for rank, for pride. Far west, across the Silver River, shimmered the lands of the Silver Tide Pack. Theirs was a kingdom of mystics, seers, and healers, wolves born with visions of the moon goddess's whispers. They were wise, peaceful, and loyal. But peace never lasts long in a world ruled by teeth and power. And in the middle of it all, the scar of the realm stretched the Roguelands. No laws, no kings, no honor. The wolves here were the exiled, the unwanted, the broken. They made their own rules, their own packs, and when the full moon rose, they hunted anything that crossed their borders. It was here that Kira Ashenblade had built her name. 8 years ago, she'd been the daughter of Silvertide's Beta, beloved, brilliant, with a wolf newly awakened and a family who believed in mercy more than might. But mercy is a fragile thing. It doesn't survive the Shadow Moon. When war came, it came fast. Shadow Moon's army burned through Silver Tide like wildfire. Dante's father, King Arcturus, believed that the seers of Silver Tide threatened his reign. He ordered their extinction. Villages turned to ash, families torn apart. The young, the old, none were spared. Kira had been 16. She remembered the screams, the scent of blood, the thunder of paws against dirt. She remembered her father's last words, run, and she remembered the face of the young commander who led the slaughter, a man with silver eyes like winter and a sword dripping with moonlight. Danta Shadowcrest. He was 21 then, following orders he couldn't refuse. But Kira never saw the duty. She saw the blade. She saw the death. When the smoke cleared, her home was gone. Her family was gone. And the girl she had been died with them. What rose from those ashes was something the Pax would learn to fear. Kira vanished into the rogue lands. For years, whispers of her name spread across Luparia like rumor and prophecy. The Ashen Blade. The rogue assassin who hunted corrupt alphas. The shadow that punished the wicked. She became myth, a ghost. A vengeance dressed in scars and silence. But vengeance has a heartbeat. And that heartbeat still remembered the face of the king who had taken everything. Now, years later, the moon goddess had played her cruelest card, binding Kira by fate to the very man she'd sworn to destroy. Dante Shadowcrest, the Alpha King of Shadow Moon. In the north, the king stood alone, 6'5", built of war and regret. His dark hair brushed the edges of his collar, his eyes silver and cold eyes that saw too much and felt too deeply. Beneath the title of Alpha King lived a man haunted by ghosts. The raid on Silver Tide had never left him. He saw it every time he closed his eyes. He remembered the flames, the dying, the child with golden eyes who had screamed for her family. And when his father died, Dante vowed that the bloodshed would end. 4 years he ruled. 4 years of trying to unmake the legacy of a tyrant. He replaced conquest with diplomacy, offered reparations to the Pax his father destroyed. He outlawed the culling of weak pups, abolished the pit fights that Ironclaw adored, and tried against all odds to rebuild peace. But peace, to his council, looked like weakness. The old guard whispered that he had gone soft, that the Alpha King who refused to bathe in blood didn't deserve the throne. And then there was the other wound, the one the world didn't see. 5 years ago, he'd scented his mate. A whisper of wildflowers and rain. The bond had struck him so suddenly that his knees nearly buckled. But before he could find her, she'd vanished. He'd searched every pack, every border, every whisper of rumor. The moon goddess had given him hope, then ripped it away. For 5 years, he had been unraveling. His wolf grew restless, violent, feral. Without his mate, his mind was fracturing. Some nights, he woke in a cold sweat, half-shifted, her phantom scent clawing at his throat. The council feared his instability. The kingdom feared his temper, but none of them understood. He wasn't broken from power, he was broken from absence. And now, standing on that blood-soaked ridge, he'd found her again in the most impossible, unforgivable form. Kira Ashenblade, the girl he'd unknowingly orphaned, the woman who'd just slaughtered half his warriors, the mate he'd been dying without. Fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of irony. And the moon goddess? She was laughing. The forest had not yet stopped bleeding. Smoke curled low to the ground, winding through the bodies of fallen warriors like restless spirits searching for peace they would never find. The moon hung heavy above, pale and silent, watching the aftermath of a storm it had surely foreseen. Kira Ashenblade moved among the dead, her steps measured, her breath shallow, her heart still drumming the rhythm of the fight. Her blade gleamed faintly, silver catching on blood, and the air still trembled with the echo of battle cries. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, restless and alive, its hunger not yet spent. She should have felt triumph. She'd planned this ambush for months, drawn every rune by hand, chosen this exact clearing because the trees narrowed here the perfect trap. And yet, standing in the center of her own victory, she felt nothing. Only the quiet ache of exhaustion and the low hum of something darker pulsing through her veins. This wasn't supposed to end like this. She'd meant to draw out the Alpha King himself, to make him face her blade the way he'd once faced her father. But instead, she'd only caught his guards his finest, yes, but not him. She'd expected resistance, maybe even death. What she hadn't expected was the way the bond would pulse through her like wildfire the moment his scent reached her. That scent, frost and pine and smoke, it cut through the air, reaching her even before she saw him. Her wolf froze, her knees nearly buckled. For one terrible heartbeat, her instincts screamed mate. She'd spent 5 years building walls to silence that voice. 5 years denying what the moon goddess had cursed her with. 5 years of hate, rebellion, and defiance. But now, as his presence rolled through the clearing like thunder, those walls cracked. She turned toward the ridge, and there he was. Dante Shadowcrest, the Alpha King. The man she'd sworn to kill. He was everything she remembered and more. Taller, broader, the aura of authority carved into every line of him. His black hair caught the moonlight, his eyes glowed silver, and his expression God's. That expression was carved from stone and fury. Their eyes met across the distance, and time fractured. Every heartbeat she'd spent hating him, every nightmare, every scar, they all collided with the raw, primal pull of the mate bond, that cruel chain forged by divine will. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. She wanted to throw her blade straight into his heart or her own. Instead, she just stood there, trembling with equal parts rage, and something she refused to name. Above, Dante's gaze locked onto her like he'd found a ghost. The scent hit him next wildflowers under storm rain. He went still, utterly still, as if the entire world had narrowed to the rogue standing among the corpses of his men. His wolf surged, howling her name before his mind could even remember it. Mate. The word burned through him like fire. No, it couldn't be. The bond that had haunted him for 5 years, the scent that had driven him mad, this couldn't be her. Not the assassin, not the rogue who had painted his forest in blood. But the truth struck fast and merciless. It was her. Dante's breath came ragged. His chest heaved. For a moment, he thought he might tear apart his own control. His wolf wanted to run to her, to touch her, to make sure she was real. But the alpha in him saw the bodies, smelled his fallen warriors, and tasted betrayal on the air. He wanted to hate her. He wanted to hate her more than anything. But hatred couldn't drown the bond. It couldn't smother the way his heart reacted to her, wild, terrified, alive. "Stand down!" he roared, voice cracking like a whip across the clearing. His alpha command rolled through the trees, unstoppable. Every surviving warrior froze mid-motion, heads bowed in instinctive obedience. Even the wounded stopped groaning. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Kira looked up at him, blade still raised, her chin high despite the exhaustion dragging at her limbs. Her golden eyes met his, unflinching. She saw the recognition there, saw the shock and the horror, and the truth he couldn't hide. Good. Let him feel it. Let him choke on it. He descended the ridge, slow and deliberate, the moonlight painting silver across his bare arms. He'd shifted mid-battle. His shirt hung in tatters, blood streaking his skin. The power radiating from him was nearly visible, ancient, dominant, terrifying. He stopped only a few feet away, his shadow falling over her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was heavy with everything they couldn't say. Then his voice broke the silence low, rough, disbelieving. "You..." The single word hit her harder than any blow. Kira's wolf howled in her chest, the bond thrumming violently. She clenched her teeth, forcing it back down. Alpha King. The title was venom on her tongue. Dante's hands trembled at his sides, his wolf pressing hard against his control. "You're my mate," he said, almost in disbelief, as if saying it might make it untrue. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She wanted to deny it, to lie, to spit in his face. But the bond pulsed between them, undeniable, mocking her fury. "You led the raid on Silver Tide," she said, her voice barely steady. You killed my family. The color drained from his face. Memories he'd buried surged forward the fire, the screaming, the girl with golden eyes. He staggered as if struck. You were, his voice cracked. You were the girl in the pack house. I was 16, she hissed. You slaughtered everything I loved. The bond snapped again, pain flooding them both. Her agony mirrored in his heartbeat, his guilt echoing in her pulse. Neither could stop it. Neither could escape. Dante's voice was a whisper of anguish. The moon goddess is cruel. Kira raised her blade between them. Then curse her for me. For a moment, he almost did. Then his tone shifted colder, commanding. A king reclaiming his crown. By law, you've declared war on Shadow Moon. You should die where you stand. Then do it, she said. He hesitated, the briefest flicker of weakness. His wolf recoiled at the thought. No, he said finally, voice like steel over fire. You'll come with me. You'll answer for what you've done. She laughed, bitter and wild. You think you can command me? I already have. His eyes burned with the kind of finality that ended wars. Clean her, he said, his voice echoing through the trees. Tend her wounds. Bring her to the palace. She took a step forward, her smile sharp as her blade. You're making a mistake, Shadowcrest. He met her gaze, unflinching. No, he said softly. I'm following fate. And as the night wind carried the scent of blood and destiny between them, they both understood the war had only just begun. The forest didn't quiet after Dante's command. It only shifted its sound from the chaos of battle to the sharp, hollow silence that follows when something sacred breaks. The last of the wounded were being tended to. The smell of iron and wolfsbane hung heavy, stinging the air like guilt that refused to fade. And in the midst of it all, Kira stood motionless, blade still in hand, watching the Alpha King vanish into the darkness between the trees. Her body was trembling, though not from fear. Her veins burned with the remnants of adrenaline, her wolf pacing beneath her skin like a caged storm. She'd seen something in his eyes, something she couldn't name, something she didn't want to name. It had been easier when he was just the monster in her nightmares. Now he had a voice, a face, a heartbeat that called to hers even as her mind screamed to silence it. The surviving Shadow Moon warriors hesitated around her. No one dared meet her gaze. They obeyed their king's command, but every movement carried unease. To them, she was a paradox, the enemy they should have executed, and the mate their king had claimed. Marcus, Dante's beta, was the first to step forward. He was a mountain of a man, with sandy hair tied back and a scar bisecting one brow. His expression was wary but not cruel. He approached her slowly, as one might approach a wounded animal. Don't touch me, Kira warned, her voice low and raw. I'd rather not, Marcus replied calmly, stopping a few paces away. But the Alpha gave his order. You're to be cleaned and taken to the palace. I'm not going anywhere with you. He sighed, glancing at the blood on her side. You might want to reconsider. You're bleeding out. She looked down. The cut was deeper than she'd realized, slicing along her ribs, the result of a lucky strike from one of the warriors before she'd finished him. She hadn't noticed the blood loss in the heat of battle, but now the edges of her vision darkened. Her wolf growled in protest, trying to heal, but exhaustion pressed down like lead. Still, she lifted her chin. I don't need your pity. Good, Marcus said, because you don't have it. He motioned to the healer who'd been tending to the injured, a woman with soft brown eyes and a calm steadiness that reminded Kira of her mother. The healer approached without fear, kneeling beside her. My name's Sage, she said gently. Let me help. Kira's instinct was to resist, but her strength was fading fast. Sage's touch was careful, professional. She cleaned the wound, applied salve that stung like fire, then wrapped it in fresh linen. Through the entire process, Kira didn't speak. Neither did Marcus. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the unspoken truth that no one knew what would happen next. When Sage finally stepped back, she said softly, "You should rest." Kira ignored her. "Why isn't he killing me?" she asked Marcus, voice sharp with defiance. Marcus hesitated, studying her as though weighing what she was ready to hear. "Because you're his mate." The word hit her like a slap. Her wolf twitched under her skin, howling with recognition. She forced the sound down, locking it deep inside her chest. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't say that." "It's the truth," Marcus replied. "And it's killing him." Kira laughed, but it wasn't humor. It was disbelief and pain wrapped in one brittle sound. "Good. Let him suffer." Marcus's gaze softened, just a fraction. "You don't know what he's suffered already." "I don't care," she snapped, her temper flaring. "He slaughtered my family, my pack, everything I was. You think a few sleepless nights make us even?" "No," Marcus said quietly. "But it makes him human." She turned away from him, jaw tight. She couldn't bear the flicker of pity she saw in his eyes. Sage handed her a clean cloak, dark, warm, faintly scented of pine. "For the journey," she said. "It's a long ride to the palace." Kira took it without a word, though every part of her screamed that accepting anything from them was betrayal. The journey began at dawn. They gave her a horse, a gray mare with soft eyes and steady steps. Not a prisoner's mount, but one chosen for comfort. She wanted to reject it, to walk instead, but her body betrayed her. She was too weak. The healer's salve dulled the pain but not the dizziness. Marcus rode beside her, silent but alert. The other warriors flanked them, keeping their distance. No one spoke. The only sound was the steady rhythm of hooves and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Kira tried not to think about where they were headed. The Shadow Moon Palace, the heart of her enemy's kingdom, the place where her nightmares had been born. Every step closer felt like walking willingly into the jaws of a beast. At one point, Marcus broke the silence. "Do you know what he did when he became king?" "I don't care," she said automatically. He continued anyway. He called a summit, every pack, every alpha. He apologized for his father's wars. He knelt in front of them, even the Silver Tide survivors, offered reparations, land, gold, whatever they needed. Kira's grip tightened on the reins. "Lies. It's the truth," Marcus said. "He's spent 4 years undoing what his father built, but his council fights him at every turn. They think mercy makes him weak. Then he should have died with his father." "Maybe," Marcus said softly. "But he didn't. And the goddess doesn't waste survival." She didn't answer. Couldn't. The wind carried the faintest trace of Dante's scent pine and smoke, and something heartbreakingly familiar, and it made her chest ache in ways she hated. She told herself it was the bond. Just the bond. Nothing more. The forest thinned as they rode, the path widening toward the distant rise of mountains. Somewhere beyond those peaks stood the palace, his palace, waiting like a shadow she couldn't outrun. Kira's fingers brushed the hilt of her blade. She'd come here for revenge, nothing more. But as the sun climbed higher and the weight of his presence tugged at the edges of her mind, a darker thought crept in. Maybe fate didn't bring her to kill him. Maybe fate brought her to break him. The Shadow Moon Palace rose from the northern cliffs like a living beast of stone. Its towers reached for the sky, their spires cutting through the fog like the teeth of a sleeping predator. Below, the vast courtyard shimmered with the silver banners of the kingdom. A kingdom built not on peace, but on obedience. Kira had imagined this place 1,000 times before, in nightmares, in memories, in the fever dreams that followed her family's slaughter. She had pictured walls soaked in blood, halls echoing with screams, and an Alpha King sitting on a throne carved from bones. But as the gates loomed ahead, she saw none of that. The palace was quiet, Not peaceful, never that, but disciplined. Guard lines stood in perfect formation. Wolves bowed low as the Beta's convoy approached. And yet, beneath that order was something uneasy, something tense. The kingdom didn't breathe easily anymore. It watched its king. Kira felt the weight of that silence pressing on her chest. Every pair of eyes followed her as they passed through the gates. Whispers rippled through the crowd, the rogue, the killer, the enemy. Some gazes burned with fear, others with hatred. A few with curiosity too dangerous to name. Marcus dismounted first and turned to her. "We're home," he said quietly, as though testing the word. Kira didn't move. The word home scraped against her skin like a blade. "Yours," she said flatly. "Not mine." He didn't argue. He only gestured for her to follow. The palace smelled of old power stone and fire and pine oil. Every step echoed through vast corridors lined with black marble and moonstone. The walls themselves seemed to hum faintly, with energy-protective runes etched deep into the surface. She could feel them pulsing against her skin, reacting to her presence. They didn't welcome her. They tolerated her. Servants and guards bowed as Marcus led her through the main hall. Some tried not to look. Others stared openly, drinking in the sight of the infamous rogue who'd spilled Shadow Moon blood. She ignored them. Her eyes caught on the tapestries, scenes woven in silver thread depicting past kings and their victories. All war, all conquest, all blood, and at the end of the corridor, one last tapestry, the current king. Dante Shadowcrest, crowned in black armor, his wolf behind him like a shadow. The woven silver of his eyes almost seemed alive, following her every move, her jaw clenched. If she'd had her dagger, she might have torn the fabric apart. They stopped at the great hall doors, massive, carved from obsidian and etched with the symbol of Shadow Moon, a wolf howling beneath a full moon. Marcus's expression was unreadable. He's waiting. Kira's heart beat once, hard. She straightened her shoulders, hiding the exhaustion that still clung to her bones. "Good. Let's get this over with." The doors opened, and the sound of her footsteps filled the chamber like thunder. He was there on the dais at the far end of the hall, seated not on a throne of gold or jewels, but one of carved wood and steel. Simple yet commanding. The Alpha King. Dante. He looked nothing like the cruel monarch her hatred had built over the years. He wasn't surrounded by fawning courtiers or slaves. He sat alone, posture straight, expression unreadable. His presence, though it filled the room, every inch of him radiated restrained power, the kind that could crush mountains or cradle worlds. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, time folded in on itself. That pull again, that insidious, electric tug in her chest that screamed mate. She despised it. He rose slowly, descending the steps toward her, every movement deliberate, controlled. The scent of him hit her first pine smoke and storm air, heavy and cold. It made her pulse stutter despite herself. "Kira Ashenblade," he said, her name low and deliberate, as though tasting it. "Rogue of the Silver Tide, assassin of Shadow Moon warriors, daughter of those my father condemned." His voice was calm, but she could feel the tension underneath the strain of keeping his wolf caged. "You forgot, murderer," she replied evenly. "You can add that to the list, too." He stopped only a few feet from her. The air between them crackled, heavy with everything unspoken rage, guilt, the cruel spark of the bond neither could sever. His gaze swept over her not in dominance, but in quiet awe, as if trying to memorize what 5 years of loss had turned her into. "You've changed." "I had to," she said. "You made sure of it." The flicker of pain in his eyes was almost imperceptible. Almost. "You hate me," he said softly. "I do." "And yet," he murmured, voice roughening, "the bond still lives." She laughed bitterly. That's the goddess's cruelty, not yours. No, he said, voice low and fierce. It's both. He turned slightly, addressing Marcus without looking away from her. She stays in the Queen's quarters. Marcus hesitated. The Queen's chambers? Dante's tone brooked, no debate. Yes. Kira's head snapped up. You think I'm some prize you can cage in silk? His gaze held hers, unflinching. I think you're mine. And I don't cage what's mine. I protect it. I don't want your protection, she hissed. Then consider it my debt, he said. A lifetime's worth of it. The words hit harder than she wanted them to. She wanted to hate his voice, to tear through the calm that wrapped around every syllable. But instead, her wolf trembled. Because beneath the steel, there was sincerity. He turned away, climbing the steps once more. Eat. Rest. You'll be safe here, she scoffed. Safe? In the heart of the monster's den? He paused, his back still to her. Monsters know how to protect their own. The hall doors closed behind her, like the ending of a chapter she hadn't agreed to write. Marcus led her away in silence, through winding staircases and moonlit corridors, until they reached a grand tower overlooking the forest. The chamber inside was breathtaking walls of glass, a bed large enough for 2 wolves in their full form, and a balcony that opened to the endless northern sky. It should have felt like a cage, but it didn't. It felt disarmingly peaceful. Kira stood by the window long after Marcus left, staring out over the dark forest. Somewhere beyond those trees, her freedom waited. But the bond's pulse in her chest told her freedom wasn't as simple as escape, because no matter how far she ran, part of her was already trapped not by the palace walls, but by the man who ruled them. And though she didn't want to admit it, part of her already knew this was only the beginning. The first morning in the Shadow Moon Palace arrived wrapped in golden silence. Sunlight spilled through the towering windows of the Queen's chambers, tracing soft lines across velvet curtains and stone floors that had seen centuries of kings and ghosts. The room smelled faintly of lavender and rain, but beneath that, Kira could still sense it him. His scent lingered everywhere, clinging to the walls, the sheets, the air itself. For a moment, she lay still. Her body ached, her side throbbed beneath its bandage, and her mind drifted through fragments of dreams she couldn't quite hold on to. Flashes of silver eyes, warm hands, the echo of a voice whispering her name like a vow. When she finally opened her eyes, reality hit hard. She wasn't in the Roguelands anymore. She was in the Alpha King's palace. A tray of food waited on the table near the balcony. Fresh fruit, warm bread, a small pot of tea that still steamed. The scent made her stomach twist. She hadn't eaten since the battle. She didn't want to owe him even the smallest thing. But her body had its own ideas. A folded note rested beside the tray, written in sharp, precise handwriting. You didn't eat last night. Please eat this morning. D. She stared at it for a long time. Her first instinct was to throw it in the fire, but the longer she looked at the letters, the careful, deliberate ink strokes, the more it unsettled her. It wasn't the note of a king issuing orders. It was personal. Too personal. She tore the bread in half and ate in silence, each bite a small betrayal of her pride. When the knock came at the door, her hand went instinctively to the dagger she'd hidden under her pillow. Her voice was steady. Come in. It wasn't Dante. It was Sage, the healer from the forest. The woman carried folded garments draped over one arm. Good morning, my lady, she said softly. Kira stiffened. Don't call me that. Sage smiled faintly, unoffended. The title comes with the room, I'm afraid, the Alpha insisted. The Alpha can choke on his own arrogance. Perhaps, Sage said, setting the clothes on a chair. But he's a considerate man beneath it. Kira snorted. Did he tell you that himself? No, I've seen it. Sage's eyes softened. He checks on his warriors when they're wounded. He visits the pack children when they're sick. He asks after names. Most kings forget names. Kira didn't respond. She didn't want to respond. She wanted to cling to her hatred. It was safer than hope. The Alpha King also requested you have access to the library, Sage continued. He thought you might need something to occupy your mind. I don't need his charity. Maybe not, Sage said kindly. But maybe you need distraction. And then she was gone, leaving the scent of herbs and quiet wisdom behind her. The hours crawled by. Kira paced the chamber, restless. Every shadow felt like a test of her control. The mate bond pulsed faintly beneath her ribs, a constant, unwanted heartbeat that wasn't hers. She could feel him through it, faint emotions like distant thunder, restlessness, frustration, longing. She pressed her palms to the cool glass of the window, breathing through the ache. "Stop it," she whispered to the empty air. "Get out of my head." But the bond didn't listen. By the second day, she couldn't bear the walls anymore. She slipped out of the chamber, ignoring the startled guards outside her door, and let instinct guide her through the labyrinth of corridors. The palace was vast, endless halls of black marble, quiet courtyards filled with moonflowers, balconies overlooking the sprawling northern wilderness. But it was the library that stopped her breath. 3 stories of books, rolling ladders, candlelit nooks, the faint hum of magic in the air. She hadn't seen this many books since her childhood in Silver Tide, when her mother used to read to her under the moonlight. The memory hit like a blade. She traced a finger along a row of spines, histories of Luparia, records of the Northern Wars, wolves, and the goddess. "I hoped you'd find this place." The voice was soft but deep, a low rumble that vibrated through the quiet. She turned sharply. He stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, dressed simply dark pants, black shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms. He looked tired, too human. Her pulse betrayed her. "You shouldn't sneak up on people. You shouldn't wander unsupervised," he countered, though there was no real reproach in his tone. "The council isn't thrilled about your presence. I don't care what they think." His lips curved faintly. "Good. Neither do I." He moved closer, slow, careful as if approaching a wounded creature that might bolt. "I didn't bring you here to cage you, Kira," he said. "I brought you here because if I didn't, they would have torn you apart before sunrise. Maybe I'd prefer that." He stopped beside a table, his hands resting lightly on the polished surface. "No, you wouldn't." Their eyes met. For the first time, she saw the torment he carried, not just guilt, but exhaustion carved into the bones of him. He wasn't the boy who had led that raid. He was something older now, heavier. "I never stopped looking for you," he said quietly. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw your face. The night of the summit, when you disappeared, I thought I'd imagined you. I thought the goddess was mocking me." "She was," Kira said, voice trembling despite her best effort. "She gave you the one person who'll never forgive you." "Then let me try anyway." His words were barely a whisper. "Let me earn even a sliver of it." For a moment, she almost believed him. Almost. Then she tore her gaze away, turning back to the shelves. "You can't fix the past, Dante." "No," he agreed softly. "But I can make the present hurt less." She didn't answer. But that night, long after she'd returned to her chamber, she found herself reaching for one of the books he'd shown her. And for the first time since her capture, she didn't dream of blood. The 5th night in the Shadow Moon Palace tasted like calm before a storm. Rain drummed softly against the glass walls of Kira's chambers, the rhythm steady, almost hypnotic. Beyond the balcony, the mountains glimmered under flashes of distant lightning. The scent of the storm carried through the air clean, sharp, alive, and yet, inside, everything felt still. Too still. The palace had grown quieter since her arrival. Servants walked softer. Guards avoided her eyes. Even the council, those gray-haired relics of Dante's father's reign, had begun to whisper behind closed doors. Kira felt it in the way the air changed when she entered a room, the way voices died and tension rose like fog. She told herself she didn't care. Let them whisper. Let them seethe. The Alpha King's mate was their curse to endure. But deep down, her instincts wouldn't quiet. Something was wrong. That night, she wandered. The palace after dark was a labyrinth of shadows and candlelight. Tapestries moved faintly in the drafts, and her own footsteps echoed too loudly. She didn't know where she was going, only that her wolf was restless, prowling beneath her skin. When she reached the council wing, she hadn't meant to. But that's where she heard it. Her name. She froze. One hand braced against the wall, every sense sharpening. The door ahead was cracked open just enough for voices to slip through. Getting too close to the rogue, a man's voice hissed. Aldrich. She recognized him at once. The oldest of the council, his loyalty belonged to the dead king, not the one who ruled now. She's clouding his judgment, another voice muttered. He's different, distracted. He's weakening, Aldrich snapped. The pack sees it. The warriors see it. This bond will ruin him and us. Kira edged closer, her heartbeat hammering in her ears. So what do? Someone whispered. We do what must be done, Aldrich said coldly. We remove the problem. Quietly. She's a rogue. No one will question her disappearance. We'll make it look like she tried to escape. Kira's stomach dropped. He'll never believe it, another protested. The mate bond. We'll make sure there's no body to find, Aldrich interrupted. He'll grieve, yes, but grief passes. He'll find a new Luna, one worthy of the throne. Silence. Then, chillingly calm. By the next moonrise, she dies. Kira stepped back, pulse roaring in her ears. For one breathless second, she considered storming in, confronting them all, blade to throat. But instinct stopped her. They were too many. And worse, they had power. She needed to tell Dante. She turned and collided with a solid chest. A hand clamped over her mouth before she could make a sound. She twisted, ready to strike, until she met the pale gray eyes of Marcus. Quiet, he whispered, releasing her. Not here. He pulled her down a side corridor, away from the council wing, not stopping until they reached an empty chamber lit only by moonlight. She spun on him, fury blazing. They're planning to kill me! I know. The words froze her mid-step. You what? Marcus's face was grim. Dante's known for days. He's been gathering proof. Aldrich's not just after you, Kira. He's planning to overthrow the king. She stared at him, heart still racing. Then why hasn't he done anything? Because he can't. Not yet. Aldrich has 3 council members on his side. If Dante moves without evidence, it splits the pack. Civil war. So I'm just bait? Marcus's jaw tightened. He'd never use you that way. She laughed bitterly. Then what am I? The perfect distraction? The cursed mate that makes his enemies reveal themselves? Marcus hesitated. You don't understand. Dante's been different since you came. Calmer, but also stronger. The pack feels it. His wolf's balance depends on you. He doesn't know you heard them, and you can't tell him. If he finds out, he'll kill Aldrich before dawn, and that will destroy everything he's built. Her nails bit into her palms. You want me to stay quiet while they plan my murder? I want you to trust him, Marcus said softly. For once, let him protect you. But Kira didn't trust anyone. She'd learned long ago that trust got people killed. When Marcus left, she sat in the darkness long after, staring at the rain-slicked windows. Lightning flashed, and her reflection glimmered faintly against the glass golden eyes, hard jaw, a warrior's face. But beneath it, she saw something else, something she didn't want to name. Fear, not of death, but of what Dante would become if she died. The next day passed like a fever dream. The tension in the palace was a living thing, thick and whispering, crawling through every corridor. The council avoided her, but she could feel their eyes on her back. That evening, she decided she'd waited long enough. When night fell, Kira slipped from her chambers, silent as a shadow. She wore black rogue clothes she'd hidden since the battle, and carried her dagger at her thigh. Her wolf moved within her, ready. She made her way to Aldrich's office in the council wing. The door was locked. It took her less than a minute to pick it. Inside, the room smelled of ink, smoke, and secrets. Papers covered the desk, but one drawer was different, reinforced, etched with faint runes of concealment. She smirked. Nice try. Her blade slid between the seams. The lock clicked. Inside were letters, dozens of them. She scanned the first few, her eyes widening with every line. The Alpha King grows weak. His mate's arrival accelerates our timeline. Prepare the Crimson Hand for movement within the month. Once Shadow Moon falls, we claim the North. Payment will be delivered in gold and blood. Her heart pounded. The Crimson Hand mercenaries, assassins, wolves without allegiance. Aldrich wasn't just planning a coup. He'd sold out the entire kingdom. Find anything interesting? The voice came from the doorway. Cold, sharp. Kira turned. Aldrich stood there, flanked by 2 guards, his eyes glittering like steel under the lamplight. You should have stayed in your cage, he said. Now you'll die before the moon rises. Kira's wolf lunged inside her chest. She didn't think she moved. The dagger left her hand before the guards could react, striking one in the shoulder. She spun toward the window, shattering the glass with her boot. For one suspended second, she saw the moon reflected in the shards. Then she jumped. 3 stories down. Into the storm. She hit the ground hard, rolled, came up running. The rain blinded her, cold and punishing, but adrenaline drowned the pain. Behind her, shouts rang through the night. She didn't look back. She ran for her life and for his. The rain came down harder, turning the palace gardens into a river of mud and silver. Kira's lungs burned as she ran, bare feet splashing through puddles, the taste of blood and iron sharp on her tongue. Behind her, the sound of pursuit, rose guards shouting, wolves snarling, the crash of armor in the storm. Lightning split the sky, illuminating her reflection in the drenched marble walls. A rogue, bloodied and desperate, hair plastered to her face, eyes blazing gold. Her wolf was close to the surface now, fighting to take over. But she couldn't afford to shift. Not yet. Not until she was clear. She cut through the lower courtyards, past the training grounds where she'd sparred with Dante days ago. The memory stabbed at her, his eyes dark with challenge, the way her body had betrayed her even then. She shoved it away. There was no room for that now. She needed to reach him. The Alpha King. Her mate. But fate wasn't that kind. The first guard caught her near the stables, tackling her into the mud. His teeth snapped for her throat. She twisted, slammed her elbow into his jaw, kicked free. Another came from behind. She spun, slicing his forearm with her dagger before he could strike. 2 more appeared from the shadows. Her muscles screamed in protest. She couldn't win this fight, not outnumbered, not bleeding. Her vision flickered. The scent of silver filled the air. One of them carried a blade dipped in poison. A blur of black moved through the storm. For a heartbeat, Kira thought the shadows themselves had come alive. Then she saw him, Dante. He hit the first guard mid-leap, shifting mid-air into his wolf form, a beast of midnight and fury. His massive frame dwarfed the men, claws tearing through armor like parchment. The guard's scream was swallowed by the thunder. The others froze, caught between fear and disbelief. Dante didn't hesitate. One swipe, one roar that cracked through the rain like divine wrath. And then, silence. He stood there, chest heaving, fur slick with rain and blood, silver eyes glowing like twin moons. His wolf turned toward her, and for a moment Kira forgot how to breathe. She'd seen him angry. She'd seen him dangerous. But this was something else. This was a god in motion. Her knees gave out. She fell to the mud, one hand pressed to her side where the wound had torn open again. He shifted back, the transformation seamless, leaving him human, bare skin glistening beneath the storm. He was at her side before she could speak, hands trembling as they hovered over her wound. "Kira," he breathed, his voice breaking. "Goddess, you're bleeding." She tried to push him away. "Aldrich, he's planning." "I know," he said, his tone low and lethal. "Marcus told me everything. But none of that matters right now." "It matters," she rasped. "He'll move tonight. He has the crimson hand." He pressed his palm over her wound, trying to stem the flow. "You think I care about coups when you're dying in front of me?" The words hit her harder than the pain. "I told you not to care," she whispered. "I can't stop," he said, voice raw. "I tried. I've fought this bond for 5 years, Kira. Every day, every night. But the moment I saw you, it was over. You're in my blood. You're in my soul. If you die, I die with you." Rain ran down his face like tears. His thumb brushed the dirt from her cheek, gentle where the rest of him was all fire. "Why?" she asked, the question torn from her. "After everything I've done, everything you've done, why?" "Because I see you," he whispered. "All of you. The warrior, the survivor, the fire that refused to die even when I destroyed everything else around it. I see you, Kira, and I love you." The word shattered something inside her. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to remind him of every corpse between them. But her wolf was howling now, desperate and wild, and she realized with painful clarity she loved him too. She always had, even when she wished she didn't. She reached up, fingers trembling, tracing the edge of his jaw. "You killed my family." "I know," his voice broke. "And I'll spend the rest of my life atoning for it." Tears mingled with rain on her face. "I don't know if I can forgive you." Then don't," he said. "Just live. That's enough for me." And then he kissed her. It wasn't soft. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, aching, raw like two souls clawing their way out of years of pain to find each other again. The bond flared between them, bright and violent. Every wall she'd built crumbled. Every scar she'd hidden was laid bare. The world fell away until there was only the storm, the heat of his mouth, the thunder of two hearts that finally beat in rhythm again. When they broke apart, she was crying. He was too. "Does this mean—" he began, but she silenced him with a touch to his lips. "It means I'm done fighting fate," she whispered. "For tonight." And as the rain fell around them, Kira let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the moon goddess had never been cruel at all. Morning broke over Shadow Moon with the quiet after a storm. The palace, still damp from rain, gleamed under the first pale light of dawn. In the courtyard below, hundreds of wolves stood in tense silence, their breath rising in faint clouds. Word had spread through the realm overnight. The Alpha King's mate had survived an assassination attempt, and the traitors were about to face judgment. Dante stood at the center of the courtyard, the weight of his crown replaced by something heavier, purpose. His shirt clung to his skin, streaked with mud and blood, but his presence was calm, regal. The mark of the Alpha burned bright in his silver eyes. Before him knelt Aldrich and 3 of the council's elders, wrists bound in silver chains. Their defiance had faded into something colder, resentment mixed with fear. Behind Dante, Kira stood tall, despite the bandage wrapped around her ribs, her hair loose in the wind, her golden eyes steady on the traitors who'd tried to end her life. She wore no crown, no jewels, but every wolf present could feel it. Her power filled the air like the scent of rain before thunder. When Dante spoke, his voice carried through the courtyard, deep and absolute. "Shadow Moon Pack," he said. "For years we were ruled by fear. We called it strength. We mistook blood for honor. But strength without mercy is rot, and rot has lived among us." His gaze locked on Aldrich. "You plotted against your king. You sold the lives of your people to mercenaries. You tried to murder my mate, the Luna chosen by the moon goddess herself. What do you have to say?" Aldrich's lip curled. "I did what your father would have done. You've let her poison you, weaken you. A king led by a woman's heart is no king at all." A growl rippled through the crowd, low and dangerous. Dante didn't move, but the power that radiated from him silenced every sound but the wind. "My father was a tyrant," he said quietly, "and his legacy ends today." He drew his sword, a blade of moon silver, its edge humming faintly with old magic. He held it to Aldrich's throat but did not strike. "The penalty for treason is death, but death would free you too easily." He turned, his voice rising. "From this day forward, Aldrich Greystone is banished, his name erased from the Shadow Moon records. He leaves these lands before the sun sets, or he will not live to see another moonrise." Gasps broke through the crowd. Exile was worse than death for a wolf. It was erasure. Aldrich's eyes flashed hate. "You think mercy makes you strong?" "No," Dante said. "It makes me free." He turned to his people. "The rest of you must decide what kind of pack will be. One that destroys, or one that rebuilds. I've made my choice." He looked to Kira. The silence that followed was holy. The priestess of the moon goddess stepped forward, silver robes glowing faintly as if touched by starlight. "Then the goddess's will must be sealed," she said. "The Alpha has chosen. The Luna must answer." The crowd bowed their heads. Only Kira and Dante remained standing in the circle of light that had formed around them. Kira's heart thundered. She'd fought him, hated him, feared him. But she had seen the man beneath the crown, the one who bled for his people, who wept for her in the storm, who refused to let power turn to cruelty. He reached out his hand, palm open. "Kira Ashenblade," he said, voice low and trembling. "Do you accept me not as your king, but as your mate?" For a long moment she said nothing. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then she stepped forward, her hand sliding into his. "I do," she whispered. "I accept you, not because the goddess willed it, but because I choose to." The priestess raised her arms. "Then under the light of the moon, I bind what was once broken." Silver radiance spilled from the sky, bathing them both in ethereal glow. Dante bent his head to her neck, his lips brushing her skin before his fangs sank in gently. Pain and pleasure fused as the mate mark flared across their bodies, bright, searing, eternal. Kira gasped, her wolf howling inside her as she returned the mark, biting into his shoulder. The magic pulsed between them, pure, luminous, alive. When the light faded, every wolf in the courtyard howled their loyalty to the newly bound pair. For the first time in decades, the kingdom didn't echo with fear, it sang with unity. 6 months later, the palace no longer smelled of blood. The walls gleamed with warmth and life. Laughter echoed where once there had been whispers. In the great hall, Kira stood by the window, sunlight tracing her hair in gold. Her hand rested on her still flat stomach. Her scent had changed. Dante had noticed it before she'd spoken the words. He came up behind her, his arms circling her waist, his voice low. "You're glowing," he murmured. She smiled. "We're going to have a pup." The words were simple, but they shook him. He turned her in his arms, eyes shining with awe and disbelief. "You've given me everything I never thought I deserved," he said. "No," she whispered. "We gave it to each other." Outside, the pack trained in peace. The rogue land's wolves had found sanctuary under her new laws. and the Silver Tide survivors had returned as allies, not enemies. Shadow Moon had become something new, a kingdom forged not by conquest, but by forgiveness. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, Kira leaned into Dante's chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. For the first time, she felt whole. The moon goddess had not been cruel after all. She had been patient. Two wolves scarred by war had found each other again, not to destroy but to heal. And under the silver light of a new moon, the Alpha King and his Luna ruled together strong, unbroken, eternal. Some stories don't end with a battle, they end with a heartbeat. The Alpha King found his redemption not in war, but in the arms of the woman who should have been his enemy. And the rogue who once swore vengeance found peace, not through blood, but through forgiveness. The kingdom they rebuilt wasn't carved from conquest. It was grown root by root, heart by heart from the ashes of what had been broken. Under the light of the moon, their bond became legend. Not because they were perfect, but because they rose again and again after being shattered. For even the fiercest wolves know, love is not surrender. It is survival. And in that survival, they found forever. The end.